Shannon, you got to play Tears of the Kingdom. I did have in the title there, You Lucky Duck, but I don't want to upset James by talking about ducks any more than we did last week.
And yet here we
Everyone
are.
knows what we're talking about. It was all off camera, so stop bringing it up.
I'm sure there's heaps you'll want to delve into and unpack, but first, tell us what you were able to play of Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, so it was honestly like the complete opposite experience that I had with Breath of the Wild demos before launch, and Nintendo were open about that in the sense that that was really just starting the game and then being let out into this world to do whatever you want. This was very much a guided experience, like really to show off the new abilities, which we'll talk about. Literally nothing story related, so not a single like cutscene, not a single like story mission, nothing to do with any kind of story or like a hint at what the mission looks like or anything to do with that. It was very much about the sandbox and what they've shown in trailers so far.
So just like kind of almost like a tech demo to kind of tinker with its systems and its mechanics, that kind of thing?
Yeah, essentially. Like it was tied to things, like some of those things I can't talk about, like even though they weren't story related, like there were certain things that made sense in the context. I think it made sense in the context of using those abilities within that world. Like nothing was like, wow, that's how that works, or wow, that's totally different to what they've shown off. It was more about the context and actually getting your hands on some of those abilities.
Right. Nintendo was keeping their cards close to their chest. I love it.
Yeah.
A big feature of what you were able to play was centered around the crafting, which we've seen a little bit more of in the most recent trailers. Can you tell us how that all works and how you found using the new crafting tools?
So Master Hand or Ultra Hand, I should have really pulled something up before this. I think
Master Hand.
Ultra Hand, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ultra Hand is the main ability that I use, and that is the one where you essentially can pick up most things in the world, whether it be things like jets or rockets that you pull out of these little plastic capsules that you get out of a vending machine. So they're one use, so you can pull out a fan anywhere or a portable cooking pot, and once you board it out of that little plastic container, like you can't put it back in. So they're single-use items that you can then attach to planks of wood or rockets, or I think even Link himself, and then use them to activate as a one-use item with battery power that replenishes as Link goes on. So it is really sandboxy, and it's also really intuitive. Like my big concern, just because I'm not the biggest like builder in games, I don't really like starting from scratch and having to come up with these insane creations. Like it is really intuitive and like super easy to pull things off if you put it in the wrong place, like really easy to rotate it. So it works well, which is what you'd expect from a Nintendo game. So my fears of that were definitely quashed. And I think as far as like sandboxy games go, I think this is going to open up that whole genre to a lot of people.
What sort of stuff were you making?
Mostly vehicles, so like planes, cars. Again, it was very guided. So like there was minor variations of what we could do, but it was very much like solve this puzzle, which you would make a car or something that floats upwards. Then there's random other items like hot air balloons that you pull out of these plastic canisters, and obviously they're like items that you use to get up in the air. But then you can also attach a steering wheel to any of these things as well, so they're all fully controllable, whether that be a plane or a car.
One of my favorite things about Breath of the Wild was that you could kind of, like, you were given the very loose instruction, I suppose, of like, okay, I need to get over there. Over there means crossing this river, but if I jump into the river, I get washed downstream. Like, the current's too strong. And so you'd have to kind of go, okay, if I cut this tree down, like up the river, it falls in, creates a bridge when it's stopped by some rocks. That kind of environmental puzzle solving. How does that change as soon as you add these kind of crafting mechanics into it? It sounds like with loads more possibility, you kind of have to make the puzzles even more complex.
I will say as well, like, the one thing it really does change is I'm assuming it opens up a lot of different ways to solve any puzzle within the game. Like, even to the point that sometimes you're really overthinking it and thinking you have to create this new object or build something, when often it's just like spinning a dial or something really simple. That's the bit I'm not sure about. I wouldn't say it changes things dramatically, but I will say, like, because you can even just pick up 5 logs and put them together to create a barrier and stop a door from closing, like it opens up a little bit more from that aspect, but nothing, like the puzzles felt familiar, right? Like they felt like they belonged in like they were in Breath of the Wild. Like nothing that I experienced, and again, this is after 2 hours within the game, felt dramatically different. It just felt like there were more options.
How long was it you were able to play the game? Was it a couple hours?
Yeah, an hour and a half, 2 hours, I would say. And yeah, that was maybe like 3 or 4 puzzles and one like major like combat scenario. But that's the other thing I want to talk about. Fuse was another really cool ability, which is the one where you can essentially fuse any item to anything within the world. So you can put a rock on a branch to make like a hammer type thing and increase your ability. But then you can also fuse literally anything to your arrows. So to my knowledge, like I didn't pick up any like elemental arrows within the world, but you would attach like jellies and even the rockets and jets to your arrows to change their abilities on the fly, which was really cool.
I was going to ask how it influenced combat at all. Like we saw in the trailer kind of attaching, I think it was like a boulder to the end of a branch to kind of make a club. Did you kind of experiment with different kind of melee combinations as well?
Yeah, again, super limited, but definitely it still, again, felt like Breath of the Wild. But again, I'm saying that and it probably sounds negative, but I feel like that was deliberate in their attempt to like have you fighting enemies that you knew from Breath of the Wild, right? Like to not spoil anything. But yeah, definitely like shields, you could attach mine carts as your shield. Like you can literally attach anything within the world to your shield and sword. And whilst I didn't get a huge taste for like the breadth of things that you would be able to do that with, like I got a sense that like, yeah, wow, like literally anything in this world I can attach to an arrow, my sword, my shield. And I think like we just touched on, like that'll make for really cool puzzles and things like that, I'd hope.
James, I might come to you. Having heard from Shannon now, having seen some of his gameplay as well, read his preview, like how are you feeling about Tears of the Kingdom at this stage and it adding more to Breath of the Wild? Do you feel like it's adding sufficiently new mechanics to keep you interested?
Yes, kind of. I don't know. I think, like I was saying to Shannon, like I know there are other people who are like me. The issues that I have with like Breath of the Wild are all no-go zones, like with this, like with what they're showing. Do you know what I mean? Like they're not marketing. Yeah. Like even just not even the preview, just the stuff that in the trailers and stuff. Like they're very, like you can kind of put stuff together, but they're definitely like keeping it all a big secret, which like I can appreciate, and I feel like games don't do that anymore, right? Like I feel like we know everything about every game before it comes out, and having grown up in an era where there wasn't a lot of internet, or there wasn't as widespread as it was, like it was you buy a game and there were all these surprises. So I can appreciate that Nintendo is creating that again in an era when I didn't really think it would be possible anymore. But on the other side, like obviously I'm very skeptical about it all. And like all the questions that I would want to ask Shannon about this demo doesn't sound like the stuff that he's experienced. Like say, are there dungeons? Are there set items? All of that kind of stuff. That being said, my interest was like at 2 out of 10 before, and when I watched,
that low.
Like I liked Breath of the Wild. I can appreciate what it did, but it just wasn't like it was a great game. I just didn't find it to be a good Zelda game. And I know that that's controversial, but I still enjoyed it. But it took a lot of the wind out of my sails for the franchise. So, what my point is, though, is I feel like seeing everything they're doing with the weapon fusion, the skills like Ascend, all of these like things that I think I've said this before, but like all of these little bits that have brought my like attention and like interest way back up, because it does seem to be addressing a lot of the problems that I had that weren't, say, dungeon based or whatever. Yeah, does that make sense? Does any of that make sense? I feel like I just like vomited everything I think about that game.
And to James's point, like I feel like Yeah, all of this, if there is dungeons and these like really crafted experiences, I think that is the one thing that was missing from like Breath of the Wild. I don't think anyone can discredit the fact that it was this big open world where you could do anything and play differently.
I've always said that like all of those systems and the physics and all of that kind of stuff are all fantastic. And now that they've got that, they've got such a solid base to build upon. Like now, like give me some like really well designed content that isn't shrines, you know, like this really cool fucking dungeon to use all of this cool shit, like almost like an immersive sim, like go into this dungeon, do whatever you want with all of the different systems that interact the way that they do, you know what I mean?
I will say, like, the verticality, like, is what felt new to me. Like, getting up to the Sky Islands felt really unique, and going across those, like, they felt like they provided different experiences, and then going below ground into caves felt different than anything in Breath of the Wild. And similarly, like, the one thing I hated in Breath of the Wild was stamina, and, like, having to climb these big-ass mountains that it'd start raining. But I feel like being able to just strap a jet to anything and fly up it really alleviated that.
Can you? Yeah,
that excites me. That you don't have to go through all that again. I feel like they've done that. That shtick's happened once. I'm obviously very critical of the climbing in Breath of the Wild. Done that to death. But yeah, I'm glad to see them just change up that approach in the game.
Can you talk much about Underground?
Yeah,
I much Underground.
Not a huge amount.
Like, I can see how, like, the sky stuff could be cool, but to me, like, everyone's like, there's, like, an underground map, too. Like, that just sounds like one giant sewer level in a video game, and I hate that shit. Like, does it actually feel like more than just tunnels, or is it literally just... Do you know what I mean? Like, you know how, like, underground and sewer levels in games are generally, like...
No, it felt like a part of the world. Like, like, there, for instance, like, I went into a cave, and then there were the new enemy types, new like ways to new puzzles to solve, and then there was like a minecart section which was a bit like Ratchet and Clanky in terms of like, I can't remember where that led to, but again, it was really limited. It just felt different, but I get what you mean in the sense that like it could feel
just like lots of barren tunnels, like that's what I imagine. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess like my hope is that they're going to lead to dungeons, right? And like that's what that is going to be about. But if it doesn't lead to that, I can see how it would just feel like they're all the same, one in the same.
Brody, where is your excitement levels at for Tears of the Kingdom at this stage? This close to launch.
Not through the roof, I suppose. Like, I didn't really play Breath of the Wild all that much. I maybe tried it for an hour, but a lot of the things that I don't really like about games like that sort of turn me off. Like, I don't like weapon degradation, and the stamina stuff while climbing kind of did throw me off and stuff. And I guess with this one, I haven't paid too much attention to it, but I've obviously heard like that it could be like analogous to like Majora's Mask or something like that with a darker tone. So that would have been one thing I'd maybe ask Shannon, but it sounds like he can't really speak to that or didn't get an impression of that. So I might wait. I'll watch a few streams maybe and see how it looks, and if it does sort of strike that darker tone, I might get interested maybe.
Yeah, I really think they've alleviated a lot of the concerns, like the weapon degradation, like the fact that you can just grab a stick, grab a rock, and fuse them together, so you're not left without a weapon.
That's a huge thing. I think that was a big part of it for me too.
100%. Even like the portable cooking pot, like if you hit like a cold area in Zelda and you didn't have the right equipment to stay warm, like you would just die or have to run away. Where now you can just cook a meal and have. It sounds like really basic, but things like that like alleviate some of those really annoying parts. I think of the original for me.
Yeah,
it does seem more like nuanced. Like, I feel like a lot of the time you would just have to make 20 apple pies and just eat them every time.
A dream.
Just damn it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Whereas, I feel like you can probably do a little bit more with this.
It's a hard one. Like I have literally zero understanding or thoughts about like how the game's going to open and how it's going to play out in terms of if it's going to follow a similar structure at all to Breath of the Wild or not, which I really thought I'd come away with in terms of like seeing Ganon's effect on the world and how that, like Brody said, the darker tones and what that's all about, but literally not a single inkling for any of that. So I'm excited to see what happens.
a pleasant surprise when the game does drop. Well, Shannon, thank you for sharing your review with us. Do go to preview, I should say. Do go and check out the full write-up as well on the site.